The courtroom was quiet that morning. Not silent, but quiet in the way that old buildings hum with age. The kind of quiet where you hear your own thoughts too loudly. The fans overhead turned slowly, stirring the warm air, while polished shoes tapped faintly on worn wooden floors. Light poured through tall windows, soft and dusty, catching the edge of a brass plaque that read, United States Military Court, District 7 inches. Inside, soldiers, officers, and civilians sat in rigid rows. Some wore dress uniforms, others civilian suits. All eyes were focused on the woman standing alone at the front. Her name was Sarah Blake. She stood tall, back straight, eyes steady, but her wrists were in handcuffs. The steel glinted cold against her tanned skin. Her military uniform was immaculate. Her seal trident pin still rested proudly on her chest. The judge, an older man with a graying mustache and tired eyes, peered at her over thin glasses. He looked like he'd seen too many cases, too many broken lives behind neat files and codes. On the other side of the room, the prosecutor, a sharp-suited man named Lieutenant Commander Marsh, shuffled papers, his face tight with tension. Sarah didn't flinch. She had faced darker things in silence. But this wasn't a battlefield. This was something else. Sarah Blake had served her country for 12 years. She had joined the Navy when she was just 19, full of fire and focus. Over time, she became one of the best snipers in the SEALs, precise, calm, and nearly invisible when she needed to be. She didn't talk much. She didn't like attention. But she was trusted. Her last mission had been different. A covert operation overseas. Details classified. There was a village, a hostage situation, and confusion in the chain of command. Orders came late. Chaos followed. In the end, a man had died. A foreign civilian. Wrong place, wrong time. But Sarah had followed the rules, her rules. She took the shot to protect her team. Still, questions were raised. A report was filed. And then, silence. 2 months later, she was pulled from duty. Then charged. Involuntary manslaughter. Misuse of force. Disobeying direct command. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She only said one thing during her arrest. I protected my team. Now, she stood here, decorated, disciplined, but bound. In the back of the courtroom sat a handful of reporters. Most were quiet, tapping notes on small screens. A few whispered to one another, trying to piece together what wasn't in the official reports. Sarah's lawyer, a younger officer named Captain Dana Morales, stood beside her. Dana was firm, with a soft voice and strong eyes. She had believed Sarah from the start. But the rules of the court were slow. They didn't bend for belief. Dana had spent the last hour defending Sarah's choices, showing maps, timelines, and the mission's confusion. She spoke calmly, clearly, with respect. But the judge remained unreadable. Finally, the judge spoke. Chief Petty Officer Sarah Blake, due to the seriousness of the charges brought against you and the circumstances surrounding your mission in Sector Juliet 12, this court must proceed to a formal review. During that time, you will be held in military custody. There was a pause. Then, the bailiff stepped forward and clicked the cuffs around her wrists. The sound echoed louder than it should have. People didn't move. Some looked down. Some stared straight ahead. A few blinked, surprised. This was a war hero, after all. But protocol was protocol. Sarah didn't say a word. Dana leaned in, whispering something, maybe reassurance, maybe instructions, but Sarah barely nodded. Then, the courtroom door creaked open. And everything stopped. He wasn't supposed to be there. Admiral James Renner hadn't attended a court proceeding in years. He was a legend. His name echoed across Navy bases and carrier decks alike. Decorated across 3 decades, once the head of Naval Special Warfare. Now retired, but still carrying weight. He stood in the doorway. Tall, broad shoulders, gray hair, neat and trimmed. His uniform was ceremonial, his posture exact. But there was something heavier in his presence, like the sea had walked into the courtroom. The guards at the door stepped aside without a word. Even the judge hesitated. Renner's eyes scanned the room slowly. Then he spoke. I'd like a word, before you take her. No one told him no. Not here. Not with that voice. The judge cleared his throat. Admiral Renner, this is an active. I know what it is, Renner said, stepping forward. I also know this woman. He walked down the aisle with steady steps, stopping a few feet from Sarah. The cuffs on her wrists hadn't moved. Her face hadn't changed, but something behind her eyes flickered. Recognition. Maybe respect. Renner turned toward the judge. With your permission, sir. I'd like to speak, for the record. The judge looked at the prosecutor. Then at Dana. Both nodded slowly. Proceed. Renner stood beside Sarah, folding his hands behind his back. I won't take much time, he began. His voice was clear, carrying gently but firmly across the courtroom. But I've served this country for 37 years. I've led men and women into war. I've written letters to families who lost their sons. And I've sat across from enemies who wanted to see us burn. He paused. In all that time, I've only met a few operators who stood out. People who weren't just brave, but good. People who knew when to act, when to wait, and when to risk everything. He looked at Sarah. She's one of them. He turned back to the judge. I read the reports. All of them. I pulled strings to get them, I won't lie. What I read was a mission compromised from the start. Incomplete intel. Faulty equipment. Delayed orders. Another pause. But what saved that team was her. Not command. Not luck. Her. Renner's voice softened. She didn't pull that trigger to harm. She pulled it to protect. A deep breath. I didn't come here to override the law. But I came here because when something's right, it deserves to be spoken. This woman didn't fail. She fulfilled everything we trained her to do. The silence returned. It wasn't the same as before. This silence was heavier, full. The judge leaned back. His fingers tapped slowly against his desk. After what felt like a full minute, he spoke. Thank you, Admiral. Renner nodded, then stepped back. Sarah hadn't moved, but her shoulders seemed slightly less rigid. Then, unexpectedly, the judge sighed. Bailiff, remove the handcuffs. Pending further review, this officer is to remain under supervised observation, not custody. There was a rustle across the courtroom. Not gasps, just breath. Like people had forgotten how to breathe for a moment. The bailiff hesitated, then stepped forward and unclasped the cuffs. They fell away. Sarah didn't smile, but she looked at Renner. And he gave her a small nod. It wasn't a celebration. It wasn't victory. The case wasn't over. But something had shifted. A weight had moved. Outside, the sky had turned soft gray. Sarah stepped out into the open air an hour later, walking beside Dana. Renner followed a few steps behind, giving them space. The press was still there, but quiet. No one shouted questions. Sarah breathed in deeply. The wind carried the scent of sea salt from the harbor. Nearby, a seagull cried in the distance. Dana broke the silence. Did you know he was coming? Sarah shook her head. No, not since my last tour. Why now? Sarah looked at the horizon. Maybe he remembered what it's like, to be the one pulling the trigger. They walked a little further. Then Sarah turned to Renner. You didn't have to come. Renner looked at her, his face calm. No, he said. But I needed to. There was a long pause between them. Not uncomfortable. Just still. Then Sarah said softly, thank you. And for the first time, she allowed herself to breathe. The case would continue. There would be hearings. More questions. More silence. But in that moment, in that pause, Sarah Blake wasn't just a soldier on trial. She was seen. Not as a weapon, but as a person. And in the quiet that followed, that was enough.